Captain Rhys Sterling squinted against the salty spray, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The sun was a molten coin sinking into the Caribbean, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and violet. But his mind was on the pale, overcast sky of a different world. It had been years since he'd set foot on the solid ground of colonial America, since he was a young man with a life ahead of him, not a past he'd stolen. Now he was coming home for a promise, a deal that would trade his infamous name for legitimacy, his weathered ship for a house with a proper garden. He stood on the deck of the Serpent's Call, his boots scuffed from 100 adventures and his coat smelling of gunpowder and rum. Below, the bustling port of Charleston, South Carolina, was a beehive of activity. The air was thick with the scent of pine tar, fish, and the faint, sweet perfume of spices. The docks were lined with merchants, sailors, and a motley collection of humanity. But Rhys's eyes were searching for one particular ship, the Providence, a sleek merchant brig from Boston. A letter from his father's old associate, a man named Henderson, had promised a bride from a prominent, though fallen, family. The arrangement was simple: a dowry to secure a future for the woman and a name to clean up Rhys's reputation. A perfect, clean deal. A way out. The Providence finally appeared as a silhouette against the last light of day, its sails furling as it approached the harbor. Rhys felt a knot of anticipation tighten in his stomach. He was a man of the sea, not of society. He knew how to command a crew and navigate treacherous waters, but the thought of a delicate, proper wife made his palms sweat. He'd envisioned a woman like the ones he'd seen in the society portraits of Boston, a fragile creature in silks and laces, with soft hands and a quiet demeanor. He would provide for her, of course, and she would bring him a quiet life away from the cutthroat world he'd created for himself. As the gangplank was lowered, a figure stepped into the fading light. She was not delicate. She was a mountain of a woman, a head taller than most men, and built with the solid strength of a blacksmith. She wore practical dark clothing that hugged her powerful frame, and her face, though handsome, was etched with a stern, unyielding expression. A shock of thick, dark hair was braided down her back. She didn't look like she belonged in a drawing room. She looked like she could sail a ship herself or fell a tree with a single swing of an axe. A murmur went through the crowd on the dock. Rhys's first mate, the wiry and perpetually amused Finn, let out a low whistle. "Captain, I believe your bride has arrived," he said, a grin stretching across his face. Rhys's heart, which had been beating with nervous anticipation, now sank with a jolt of alarm. This was not the woman of the portrait. This was not the quiet, demure life he had been promised. This was something else entirely. As the woman's sharp, intelligent eyes swept over the dock, they landed on him. He felt an instant and undeniable current pass between them. It wasn't one of affection or romance, but of raw, primal challenge. He had waited for his escape, his key to a new life, and instead he was faced with an even bigger conflict than the one he was trying to leave behind. He hadn't just been given a wife, he'd been sent an equal, a force of nature with a will as strong as his own. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button to follow the rest of this epic journey. Your support helps us create more compelling stories for you. Now, let's get back to the narrative. The woman strode down the gangplank with the confidence of a queen, her heavy sea bag slung over one broad shoulder. Her name, as Rhys would soon learn, was Elara. When she reached him, her voice was a low, resonant rumble, a stark contrast to the lilting tones he had expected. "Captain Sterling," she said, her eyes a deep, intelligent brown that seemed to assess him completely. "I am Elara Vance. I was told a gentleman of your profession required a wife." Rhys, for a moment, was speechless. He was used to being the one in command, the one who held all the cards. But facing Elara, he felt a strange sense of being outmatched. "The letter promised a Miss Henderson," he replied, his own voice sounding hollow. "My cousin, Sarah," Elara said with a wry twist of her lips. She had an unfortunate case of second thoughts and a fortunate case of a wealthy admirer who rescued her from this arrangement. Her father, my uncle, was distraught. He was about to lose the dowry you offered, which his family desperately needs. So he sent me instead. She dropped the bag to the ground with a dull thud. Consider me the salvage. I'm not a blushing bride, Captain. I am a woman of means, though not by birthright, and I have a proposition for you. They retreated to a small private tavern, the air thick with pipe smoke and the chatter of sailors. Over mugs of bitter ale, Elara laid out her terms. She wasn't seeking a husband, but an ally. Her family's fortune had been stolen years ago, not by pirates, but by a ruthless merchant named Silas Thorne, a man who now controlled much of the shipping in the Caribbean. Thorne had manipulated her father, leaving the Vance family destitute. What's more, she revealed a secret that made Rhys's blood run cold. Silas Thorne has a new protégé, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. A young boy, just a child, whom he has taken under his wing. He's teaching him the trade, showing him the darker side of business. The boy is my younger brother, Thomas. He was taken from our family after Thorne's deception and is being raised as a commodity, not a son. He is the true heir to what was stolen. Rhys felt a profound disquiet. He knew the name Silas Thorne. The man was a ghost, a legend whispered about in dark corners of the taverns, a merchant whose ships were never attacked because he had a fearsome reputation and alliances with every powerful faction, including some of the most dangerous pirate captains. The idea that Thorne was raising Elara's brother as his own pawn was a chilling detail. It was also a direct connection to a past Rhys was trying to forget. He passed of betrayal and violence, all at the hands of Thorne's network. "What do you want from me?" Rhys asked, his mind racing. "I want you to help me expose Thorne and rescue my brother," Elara said, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "Your reputation and knowledge of the sea can get us close to him in a way no one else can. In return, I offer you the legitimacy you crave, my family's name, my own considerable wealth, which I have earned on my own terms, and my knowledge. We can be a formidable force, Captain, a partnership of equals." Rhys looked at the woman across the table. She wasn't the meek bride he expected. She was a storm, and he was being asked to sail right into her eye. This wasn't a convenient deal. It was a crusade. But as he looked at her, he realized the deal he had imagined was a trap of its own. A life of quiet boredom, trapped by the lie he'd built. This, however, was a chance to fight, to live, and to find a kind of redemption he hadn't known he was looking for. He took a long drink of his ale and set the mug down. "A partnership of equals," he said, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. "I believe I can work with that, Miss Vance, but one condition. We get your brother, we do it my way." Elara met his gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than stern resolve crossed her face. A hint of relief, perhaps, and a deeper respect. "Agreed, Captain. We do it your way." The world had just gotten a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting. Their alliance was built on necessity and a mutual understanding of the shadows they both inhabited. Rhys and Elara spent the next several days in Charleston, not as a betrothed couple, but as strategists. They met in the back rooms of taverns and in the secluded corners of the port, poring over maps and old shipping logs. Elara proved to be as cunning as she was physically imposing. She had meticulously documented Thorne's shipping routes and his movements, information she had gathered over years of working as a ledger clerk on merchant vessels. Her mind was as sharp as a cutlass. "He's operating out of Tortuga now," she explained, tracing a finger across a faded map. "It's the heart of the pirate world, which is why he feels so secure there. He has a network of spies and informants. He knows everything that goes on. We can't just sail in." Rhys nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. We'll need to go in undercover. As what? A merchant and his wife? He asked, a touch of humor in his voice. Elara's expression remained serious. We'll be a merchant and his partner. We need to create a new persona, a trading company looking for new opportunities. Something believable. Your ship, the Serpent's Call, is too well known. We'll need a different vessel and a different crew. Rhys considered this. My men are loyal, but they're pirates. They're not going to be able to play the part of a merchant crew. They won't have to, Elara said, a glint in her eyes. We'll need a small crew, just a handful of your most trusted. The rest will need to stay here. We'll use one of the merchant ships I have contacts with, a vessel that won't raise suspicion. Their conversations were often tense, a clash of two powerful personalities. Rhys was a man of action, accustomed to brute force and swift decisions. Elara was a woman of patience and calculated risk, a master of deception. He learned to respect her foresight, and she, in turn, began to see that his seemingly reckless bravery was often the result of years of experience and intuition. Their opposing methods began to complement each other, forging a bond far stronger than a simple marriage contract. One evening, as the moon cast a silver glow over the harbour, Rhys found Elara staring out at the sea. Her usual stern facade had softened, revealing a profound sadness. He was just a boy when they took him, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He was so small. I used to tell him stories of the sea, of pirates and adventurers. He loved them. I never thought he'd become part of a story like this, a pawn. Rhys stood beside her, his silence a form of comfort. He understood the weight of her grief. He too had a ghost in his past, a younger brother who had been taken from him in a raid long ago. The memory was a bitter poison he carried every day. He had never spoken of it to anyone. It was the reason he had embraced the life of a pirate, a life of vengeance against those who preyed on the weak. His rivalry with Thorne wasn't just professional, it was personal. He had tracked Thorne's network for years, but the man himself was a phantom. We will find him, Elara, Rhys said, the words coming from a place of deep, personal conviction. I promise you. And when we do, we will make sure he understands what a real hero is, not a monster like Thorne. Elara looked at him, and for the first time she saw beyond the infamous pirate captain. She saw a man driven by a similar wound, a man who understood the pain of loss and the relentless desire for justice. Their alliance, which had begun as a cold negotiation, was slowly but surely transforming into something more. It was a shared purpose, a bond forged in the fires of their pasts, and a mutual determination to reclaim what had been stolen from them. They were not just partners in a rescue mission. They were two people on a collision course with destiny, ready to face the ghosts that haunted them both. The journey to Tortuga was a tense yet enlightening experience. Rhys and Elara sailed on a small, unassuming merchant sloop they had acquired from one of Elara's contacts, the Seagull's Song. Their crew was a hand-picked group of Rhys's most reliable and quick-witted men, led by Finn. They had been given strict instructions to act like legitimate traders, a role they played with varying degrees of success. Finn, in particular, found the pretense highly amusing, often winking at Rhys as he spoke of market fluctuations and price per ounce of spice. The sea air, however, did little to lighten the mood. The closer they got to Tortuga, the more palpable the tension became. Elara spent her days studying maps and analyzing shipping routes, her face a mask of concentration. Rhys watched her, struck by her unwavering focus. She was not the delicate flower he had imagined, but a force of nature, a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He found himself drawn to her strength, her quiet intensity, and the way her eyes would light up with a fierce intelligence when she talked about a plan. One afternoon, a sudden, violent squall descended upon them. The sky turned a sickly green, and the winds howled, tearing at the sails. The crew, despite their pirate training, were taken by surprise. As the ship was tossed about like a toy, a heavy cargo crate broke free of its lashings and slid precariously across the deck, threatening to crush one of the men. Without a moment's hesitation, Elara, who was at the helm, released the wheel and moved with astonishing speed. She braced herself against the bulkhead and, using her immense strength, pushed back against the sliding crate. Her feet dug into the wet wood as she strained, her muscles coiling like ropes. She grunted with effort, and slowly she managed to divert the crate just as it was about to hit the sailor. Rhys, who had been scrambling to secure the rigging, watched in awe. This was not the strength of a pampered lady, but of someone who had worked hard, who had lived a life of physical labor and survival. When the storm passed and the sea calmed, he found her back at the helm, her breathing heavy, but her expression unchanged. "You could have been killed," he said, his voice laced with a genuine concern that surprised even himself. "And you could have lost a good man," she replied simply, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. "We're in this together, Captain. We save what we can." Her words resonated with him. This was not just a mission to rescue a boy. It was a mission to save a family, to right a wrong. And for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope that went beyond his own redemption. As they approached the infamous port of Tortuga, a sprawling, chaotic den of vice and opportunity, Rhys felt a new resolve settle in his heart. This wasn't a game, it was a battle, and he was ready to face the devil himself to help the woman who had become his unlikely partner. If you're finding yourself invested in this story, now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel. Join our community and be the first to know when a new video drops. Your support means the world to us and allows us to keep creating. Now let's continue the adventure. Tortuga was a sensory assault. The air was thick with the stench of rum, sweat, and open sewers. The docks teemed with pirates, merchants, and sailors of every nationality, their voices a cacophony of languages and curses. Rhys and Elara, dressed in the respectable but plain clothes of a trading couple, walked with purpose, their eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of Thorne's presence. Thorne's influence was everywhere. His company, the Thorne Trading Consortium, had its logo emblazoned on crates and warehouses. The sheer scale of his operation was staggering. It wasn't just a business, it was an empire built on fear and coercion. As they navigated the crowded streets, Rhys noticed the subtle signs of a man who commanded respect through terror. Guards with Thorne's crest on their jackets stood at every corner, their eyes cold and watchful. They found Thorne's primary office, a grand two-story building that stood in stark contrast to the ramshackle taverns and brothels that surrounded it. They waited for an opportunity to get inside, and it came in the form of a heavily guarded shipment of spices and silk. Posing as prospective buyers, they managed to secure a meeting. The guards were suspicious but professional, and they were eventually led into a lavishly decorated office. Silas Thorne was a man who exuded power, not through brute force, but through a chilling, predatory stillness. He was a slight man, impeccably dressed, with a clean-shaven face and eyes as cold and grey as a winter storm. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 threats. He had no need for a booming command. His control was absolute. "And who might you be?" he asked, his gaze settling on Elara. It was a look that made her skin crawl, a look that stripped her down and valued her like a piece of cargo. "Elara and Samuel Vance, of the Vance Trading House," Elara said, her voice steady and confident. "We've come seeking opportunities in the new world." Thorne's eyes narrowed slightly, a fleeting spark of recognition. "Vance. The name sounds familiar. A small-time Boston family, I believe. Fallen on hard times." He smiled, and the gesture was devoid of all warmth. It was a sneer. My apologies, I dealt with so many. It's hard to keep track of every acquisition. The word acquisition was a deliberate insult, a reminder of what he had done to her family. Rhys saw Elara's hands clench at her sides, but her expression remained impassive. "We are in the process of rebuilding," she stated, her voice like steel, "and we are looking for a reliable partner." Thorne leaned back in his chair, a bored look on his face. "I am not interested in small-time ventures. I have no time for petty business." Just as he was about to dismiss them, a boy entered the office. He was a slender child, no older than 12, with Elara's dark hair and a serious, focused expression. He carried a stack of ledgers and placed them on Thorne's desk with an efficient, practiced movement. "These are the new manifests for the Sea Dragon," the boy said, his voice soft. He looked up and his eyes met Elara's. For a fleeting moment, recognition flashed in his gaze, not of her face, but of a shared feature, the curve of his brow, the color of his eyes. "Thomas," Elara whispered, the name a raw, broken sound. The boy's head snapped up. He stared at her, a look of profound confusion and fear on his young face. It was her brother. He was not a prisoner, not in a cage, but a prisoner of the mind. He was being shaped into Thorne's perfect successor. The reality was more chilling than she had imagined. Thorne, seeing the interaction, smiled with a cold satisfaction. "Ah, you know my ward, Thomas. A truly gifted boy. He's learning so much. He's going to be a man of great wealth and power, a better man than his father ever was." The words were a venomous jab, a final confirmation of the cruelty of his act. Elara's composure shattered. "You won't get away with this," she said, her voice trembling with rage. Thorne merely laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "I already have, my dear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual business to attend to. Guards, show these people out." As the guards moved to escort them, Elara's eyes locked with her brother's. In that moment, a silent message passed between them, the promise of a rescue. The boy's eyes, full of fear, held a glimmer of hope that had been missing. The mission had just become a race against time, with the stakes higher than ever. Outside Thorne's opulent office, the air felt suffocating. Elara was visibly shaken, her usual stoicism replaced by a raw, seething anger. "He's changed him," she said, her voice trembling. "He doesn't even remember me. He calls Thorne his guardian." Rhys put a hand on her shoulder, a rare, comforting gesture. "He remembered your face, Elara. There's still a part of him that knows. He just needs a reminder." They retreated to a secluded tavern, its backroom offering a modicum of privacy. The sight of her brother had cemented their purpose, but it had also made the task infinitely more difficult. Thomas was not being held in a dungeon. He was a living, breathing part of Thorne's household. A direct assault was out of the question. "We need to get him alone," Rhys said, his mind already working on the next steps. "He's going to the Sea Dragon with the manifests. It's an old merchant ship. Thorne uses it for his less than reputable cargo. It'll be a fortress." Elara wiped a tear from her cheek, her face hardening with resolve. "We can't just storm the ship. It will be heavily guarded. We have to be clever." Rhys looked at her, and a reckless idea took shape in his mind. "We don't need to storm it. We just need to get on it. I know the layout of a merchant brig like that. They're predictable, but we need a distraction." "I have a plan for that," Finn said, who had been listening intently from a corner of the room. "We cause a bit of chaos. A fire, a brawl, something that draws their attention away from the ship. The docks are already a tinderbox of rivalries and feuds. It wouldn't take much to ignite a riot." The plan began to form, a daring gamble that relied on a precise sequence of events. While Finn and a small team of Rhys's men would create a diversion at the far end of the docks, Rhys and Elara would slip onto the Sea Dragon. The ship would be in the process of loading, making it a place of ordered chaos. They would need to find Thomas, get him off the ship without a struggle, and get to a pre-arranged rendezvous point. "The greatest obstacle isn't the guards," Elara said, her eyes fixed on Rhys. "It's Thomas. We don't know how he'll react. He might not even recognize me. We have to be ready for him to fight us, for him to think we are the enemy." Rhys nodded grimly. "I understand. We have to be gentle. We have to show him we're not going to hurt him." He looked at Elara, and his gaze softened. He needs to see the sister he remembers, not just a woman who has come to take him away. The weight of the mission now fell squarely on their shoulders. The fate of a young boy, the justice for a stolen family fortune, and the closure for their own haunting pasts, it all depended on this one desperate plan. The night was cold and damp, the air thick with the promise of violence, but in the small, shadowy back room of the tavern, a new kind of fire was being forged between two people who had once been strangers. They were a team, and they were ready to risk everything for a cause they now truly believed in. The night of the rescue was a blur of adrenaline. A staged commotion at the docks drew away most of Thorne's guards, allowing Rhys and Elara to slip onto the Sea Dragon undetected. Rhys quietly took out the lone watchman, and they navigated the ship's dark corridors until they found Thomas's cabin. Inside, Thomas was hunched over a ledger, his young brow furrowed in concentration. Elara's heart pounded as she pushed the door open. "Thomas," she said softly. "It's me, Elara, your sister." The boy's face filled with fear and confusion. He tried to run, but Elara blocked the door, pleading with him. She spoke of private childhood memories, the music box, the stories she used to tell him, until a flicker of recognition broke through the wall of Thorne's deception. Tears streamed down his face. "Elara," he whispered. "Yes, Thomas. It's me." She knelt and embraced him, and for the first time, he let himself cry. Just as they heard Thorne's voice in the distance, Rhys scooped up Thomas. "We have to go now," he said. They made for the lower deck, but as they emerged, they were met by Silas Thorne himself, flanked by guards. The snake had been waiting. Thorne's smile was terrifying. "A Vance and a Sterling," he sneered. "I'll take back what's mine." Rhys placed Thomas behind him. "He's not yours, Thorne. He's coming with us." Thorne laughed and ordered his guards to attack. A brutal fight ensued. Rhys, a master with his cutlass, fought with lethal efficiency, while Elara used her immense strength to incapacitate the men. In the chaos, Thorne tried to escape. Rhys gave chase and cornered him, but Thorne pulled a small pistol, aiming it at Elara and the boy. "I can still take something from you," he yelled. Just as he was about to fire, Thomas threw a piece of rope rigging at Thorne's hand. The pistol clattered to the deck. Enraged, Thorne lunged for the boy, but Rhys was faster. He swung his cutlass, severing Thorne's fingers. Screaming, Thorne stumbled backward, lost his footing, and fell into the dark waters below. He was gone. The fight was over. Elara held her brother, her eyes filled with tears of relief. Thomas looked at Rhys and for the first time saw not just a pirate but a hero. You saved us," Thomas said. Rhys knelt down, meeting his gaze. "We all did, Thomas. We're a family." He looked at Elara, a profound sense of peace settling in his heart. His search for a new life had brought him to this moment, with the woman who had become his partner and the boy who had found his way home. With Thorne's death, his empire crumbled. Rhys and Elara sailed back to Charleston on the Seagull's Song. The journey was calm, filled with a sense of healing and purpose. Thomas slowly began to adjust, opening up to his new family. Elara taught him their family history, and Rhys taught him about the sea. Their arrival in Charleston was met with quiet respect. The story of Thorne's downfall had spread, and Rhys was now seen as a hero. He had earned his legitimacy through a heroic act, not a contract. The Vance family, overjoyed to have Thomas back, welcomed Rhys. They decided to stay in Charleston, buying a sturdy house near the harbour with a view of the sea. "Are you going to miss the pirate life?" Elara asked one day. Rhys looked at her. "I'm not leaving the sea behind, Elara," he said. "I'm just charting a new course, one with a much better crew." In the months that followed, Rhys became a successful maritime security consultant, working alongside Elara. Their partnership was now a thriving business. Thomas began to heal, his fear replaced by the love and stability of his family. He was no longer a pawn, but a boy with a future. One sunny afternoon at the docks, Rhys looked at his family. "We need a new ship," he said. "Something for us." "What would you call it?" Elara asked. Rhys knelt down next to Thomas. "The Vance legacy," he said, "a tribute to a family that was almost lost, but was found again." Elara's eyes shimmered as she took his hand. It was a touch of strength, partnership, and love. Standing together, a family forged by shared trials, they knew Rhys had found his greatest treasure, a life lived honestly, with love and family at his side. He was no longer running from his past. He was building a future, one horizon at a time.